In a distant corner of the galaxy, where stars burned bright and planets floated like tiny specks in an endless sea, the Zyran Empire reigned supreme. For centuries, they had been the most powerful force in the known universe, their technology unmatched and their armies unstoppable. But on this day, something strange appeared on their long-range scanners. Something that sent shockwaves through their command centers. A warship, sleek and dark, drifted near the edge of their territory. It didn't belong to any known species or empire. Its design was unfamiliar, but what truly alarmed the Zyrans was its size and power. The ship seemed to hum with energy, its weapons systems glowing faintly, as if ready to strike at any moment. When the Zyran analysts ran scans on the vessel, they discovered something even more unsettling. It wasn't just alien, it was human. The news spread quickly. Through the Empire's ranks, humans were considered primitive, little more than pests crawling on a small blue planet at the edge of the galaxy. They had no business building ships capable of challenging the mighty Zyrans. Yet here it was, proof that humanity had somehow leaped far ahead of its time. The High Council convened in panic, their faces pale with fear. If humans could build such a ship, what else were they capable of? Inside the mysterious warship, Captain Jonathan Hayes stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the view screen. He was a tall man with sharp features and a calm demeanor, though he carried the weight of an entire species on his shoulders. Beside him, Commander Aaron Blake reviewed the data streaming in from their sensors. "They've spotted us," Aaron said, his voice steady but tinged with tension. "Orders." Jonathan hesitated for a moment before replying. "Hold position. We're not here to start a fight, but we won't back down either." His words echoed across the bridge, reaching the ears of the crew who worked tirelessly at their stations. Each of them knew the stakes. This mission wasn't just about testing their new ship. It was about survival. Earth needed time to prepare for whatever might come next, and the Invincible was their first line of defense. Back on Earth, people went about their daily lives, unaware of the drama unfolding light years away. Farmers tilled fields, children played in parks, and cities buzzed with activity. But deep underground, in secure facilities hidden from prying eyes, scientists and engineers monitored the situation closely. Daniel Carter, one of the lead engineers, stared at a holographic display showing the Invincible. "We did good work," he muttered under his breath, though pride mingled with worry. The ship was humanity's greatest achievement, but it also made them a target. Meanwhile, aboard the Invincible, the crew prepared for anything. Maria Lopez, the ship's chief communications officer, adjusted her headset and listened intently for signals from the Zyrans. So far, there had been nothing but silence. "Do you think they'll try to talk?" she asked aloud, glancing at Jonathan. "I doubt it," Jonathan replied, his gaze still locked on the screen. "But we'll give them the chance." As the hours passed, the tension grew thicker. The Zyrans weren't responding, but their fleet began moving. Ships large and small shifted positions, forming a defensive perimeter around their borders. To the crew of the Invincible, it felt like being watched by a predator lurking in the shadows. Still, they held their ground, knowing retreat wasn't an option. Little did anyone know, this encounter was only the beginning. The Zyrans wouldn't let this insult go unanswered, and humanity would soon find itself facing a challenge unlike anything it had ever known. For now, though, the Invincible floated silently in space, a symbol of hope and defiance against an empire that thought it ruled the stars. Back on Earth, President Laura Bennett sat in the Oval Office, her face illuminated by the soft glow of a computer screen. She scrolled through classified documents detailing the creation of the Invincible. It was a secret she carried alone, for years, one that now threatened to unravel everything humanity had built. The ship wasn't just another military project. It was the result of decades of stolen alien technology, reverse-engineered, and refined in hidden labs across the globe. Engineers like Daniel Carter and Maria Lopez had dedicated their lives to making it a reality, working in silence while the rest of the world remained oblivious. Laura leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. The Xyrans were no ordinary enemy. They ruled vast stretches of space with an iron fist, their fleets unmatched and their weapons devastating. If they decided to attack Earth, there would be little time to prepare. Humanity's survival depended on keeping the invincible operate hidden as long as possible. But now, the ship's existence was out in the open, and the Empire was already mobilizing. The President picked up her phone and dialed a secure line. Moments later, General Patricia Moore appeared on the screen. Her sharp eyes and stern expression made her look every bit the hardened soldier she was. "Madam President," she said, her voice clipped and professional. "What's the situation?" "We've got a problem," Laura replied, cutting straight to the point. "The Xyrans know about the Invincible. Their fleet is moving toward our borders. We need to act fast." Patricia nodded grimly. "I'll rally the defense forces, but we both know this isn't just about firepower. This is about strategy. Captain Hayes needs reinforcements if he's going to hold them off." Laura sighed, rubbing her temples. "I'll address the United Nations tomorrow. For now, keep this under wraps. The last thing we need is mass panic." As the call ended, Laura turned her attention to another pressing matter: the scientists. Civilian researcher Emily Grant had been vocal about the risks of escalating conflict. Her warnings weren't unfounded. History had shown that rushing into war often led to disaster. Laura decided to meet with Emily personally, hoping to gain insight into the Xyrans' capabilities. At a secure facility deep underground, Emily stood surrounded by holographic projections of alien ships and weapons. She studied them intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. When Laura entered the room, Emily looked up, startled. "Madam President," she said, quickly composing herself. "What brings you here?" "I need your expertise," Laura said, getting straight to the point. "Tell me what you think the Xyrans are planning." Emily hesitated before speaking. "Their technology is advanced, but not invincible. If they're panicking over the Invincible, it means they see us as a real threat. But that also makes them unpredictable. They might strike first, without warning." Laura nodded thoughtfully. "And if they do, then we'll need more than just one ship," Emily replied bluntly. "The Invincible is powerful, but it can't fight an entire empire alone. We'll need allies or at least a way to level the playing field." Laura mulled over Emily's words as she left the facility. The scientist's concerns weighed heavily on her mind. War was never simple, especially when facing an enemy as formidable as the Xyrans. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that humanity's greatest strength lay not in its weapons, but in its ability to adapt and survive. Meanwhile, aboard the Invincible, Captain Jonathan Hayes received updates from Earth. He knew the stakes were higher than ever. The crew worked tirelessly, running simulations and preparing for any scenario. Maria Lopez fine-tuned the communication systems, while Daniel Carter monitored the ship's experimental cloaking device. Every member of the team understood the gravity of their mission. Jonathan stood on the bridge, staring out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Xyrans were watching, waiting. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: humanity wouldn't go down without a fight. The Invincible wasn't just a ship, it was a symbol of hope, proof that even the smallest spark could ignite a flame in the darkest of times. The tension aboard the Invincible was palpable as Captain Jonathan Hayes paced the bridge. The crew moved silently, their eyes glued to their stations, each person aware that any mistake could mean disaster. For hours, the ship had floated, near the edge of Xyran space, its systems running quietly. So far, there had been no direct contact with the Empire, but everyone knew it was only a matter of time. Commander Aaron Blake stood beside Jonathan, his hands clasped behind his back. "We're being watched," he said, breaking the silence. Their scout ships are closing in. Jonathan nodded grimly. Let's see what they want. On the main screen, 3 small Zyran vessels appeared, their sleek designs glinting in the light of a nearby star. They moved cautiously at first, circling the Invincible like predators, sizing up their prey. Maria Lopez, the communications officer, adjusted her headset and tried to establish contact. "This is Captain Jonathan Hayes of the United Earth Fleet," she said, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling beneath the surface. "We are not here to provoke conflict. Please respond." There was no reply. Instead, one of the scout ships fired a warning shot, its energy blast narrowly missing the Invincible. The crew flinched, but Jonathan remained calm. "They're testing us," he muttered under his breath. Aaron stepped closer. "Orders, sir." "Hold position," Jonathan replied firmly. "But prepare for evasive maneuvers if needed." The Zyrans didn't wait long before escalating. Another blast came hurtling toward the Invincible, this time aimed directly at the ship's engines. Alarms blared across the bridge as the crew scrambled to react. Daniel Carter, the chief engineer, shouted from his station. "Shields are holding, but we can't take many more hits like that." Jonathan clenched his jaw. "Return fire, target their weapon systems only. We're not here to start a war." Aaron relayed the order, and within seconds, the Invincible responded. A single beam of energy lanced out from the ship's cannons, striking one of the scouts with precision. The smaller vessel shuddered, its weapon array disabled. The other 2 scouts hesitated, clearly unprepared for such a swift and powerful counterattack. Maria tried again to communicate. "We do not seek conflict. Stand down, or we will defend ourselves." This time, the response came not in words, but in action. The remaining scouts launched another volley of attacks, forcing the Invincible to maneuver sharply. The ship groaned under the strain as it dodged the incoming blasts, its advanced systems keeping it just ahead of danger. Jonathan gripped the railing of the bridge, his knuckles white. "Enough," he growled. "Disable them." The Invincible unleashed its full potential. Its experimental plasma cannons roared to life, sending waves of energy crashing into the enemy ships. One by one, the scouts were neutralized, their hulls smoking and drifting helplessly in space. Within minutes, the skirmish was over. Silence fell over the bridge as the crew processed what had just happened. They had won, but the victory felt hollow. Jonathan turned to Aaron. "Get me a damage report, and send a message back to Earth. Tell them the Zyrans aren't interested in talking." Back on Earth, news of the encounter reached President Laura Bennett. She listened intently as General Patricia Moore briefed her on the situation. "It's worse than we thought, Patricia," said her voice heavy with concern. "The Zyrans have declared humanity a threat. Their High Council is calling for immediate retaliation." Laura sighed, rubbing her temples. "So much for diplomacy." In the shadows of the galaxy, the Zyrans regrouped, their pride wounded and their fear growing. Humanity had proven itself dangerous, and now the Empire was determined to crush this unexpected adversary. Unbeknownst to either side, this clash was merely the beginning of something far greater, a struggle that would test the limits of both species and reshape the future of the stars. Back on Earth, the news of the skirmish with the Zyrans spread like wildfire through the highest levels of government and military command. The United Nations convened an emergency session in a secure underground chamber, where leaders from around the world gathered to discuss the growing threat. The room buzzed with tension as delegates argued over the best course of action. Some called for immediate retaliation, while others urged caution. Knowing that humanity was outmatched in numbers and resources, Senator Robert Klein stood at the podium, his voice calm but firm. "We cannot afford to act rashly," he said, addressing the assembly. "The Zyrans are powerful, and we don't fully understand their capabilities. Our priority must be diplomacy. We need to show them that we're not looking for war, General Patricia Moore listened silently from her seat, her arms crossed. When it was her turn to speak, she rose to her feet, her presence commanding attention. Diplomacy is important, she admitted, but we can't ignore the fact that the Xyrans have already declared us a threat. Their actions speak louder than words. If we don't prepare for war, we'll be caught off guard when they strike, and they will strike. The room erupted into heated debate. Some sided with Klein, believing that peace talks could still work. Others backed Moore, convinced that humanity needed to take a stand. Amidst the chaos, civilian scientist Emily Grant sat quietly in the corner, observing the proceedings with a troubled expression. She had been invited to provide insight into the Xyrans' technology, but so far, no one had asked for her opinion. Finally, President Laura Bennett raised her hand, calling for silence. The room fell quiet as all eyes turned to her. Both sides make valid points, she began, her tone measured but resolute. We need to explore every option: diplomacy, defense, and intelligence. But above all, we need unity. If we divide now, we're finished. Her words seemed to calm the room, but the underlying tension remained. After the meeting adjourned, Laura approached Emily privately. "What do you think?" she asked, her gaze searching. Emily hesitated before answering. "I think we're focusing too much on what we should do, and not enough on what we should understand. The Xyrans aren't just aggressive, they're scared. Scared of us. That fear will drive them to make mistakes, but it also makes them unpredictable. If we push too hard, they'll retaliate without thinking. If we pull back, they might see it as weakness." Laura nodded thoughtfully. "So, we walk a fine line." "Exactly," Emily replied, "and time isn't on our side." As the leaders debated, ordinary people across the globe began to feel the weight of the crisis. News outlets reported on the encounter with the Xyrans, though details were scarce and heavily censored. Rumors spread faster than facts, leading to panic in some areas. Families stocked up on supplies, businesses braced for economic turmoil, and governments scrambled to maintain order. In cities and small towns alike, conversations turned to the same question: would there be war? At a military base in Nevada, pilots Samantha Reed and Kyle Bennett prepared for deployment. Both were seasoned veterans, but the idea of facing an alien fleet filled them with unease. They ran drills in their fighter jets, practicing formations and attack strategies. Between exercises, they talked about the mission ahead. "You ever wonder if this is how it starts?" Samantha asked, leaning against her jet. "One little fight, and suddenly everyone's at each other's throats." Kyle shrugged, wiping grease from his hands. Conversationally, he responded, "Maybe, but we didn't pick this fight. If they come for us, we'll be ready." Meanwhile, aboard the Invincible, Captain Jonathan Hayes received updates from Earth. He knew the pressure was mounting, both on his crew and on the planet they were sworn to protect. Every decision he made carried immense weight, and he couldn't afford to falter. As he stared out at the vast expanse of space, he felt the enormity of the task before him. Humanity's survival depended on the choices they made, no on the courage to face whatever came next. Deep within Earth's classified intelligence network, Agent Ryan Foster worked tirelessly to uncover a growing threat. For weeks, he had been tracking unusual activity, a series of encrypted messages, bouncing between high-ranking officials and unknown recipients. The patterns were subtle, almost invisible, but Ryan's instincts told him something was wrong. Someone inside the system was leaking information to the Xyrans. Ryan sat in a dimly lit room, surrounded by screens displaying streams of data. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he traced the source of the leaks. Each discovery brought him closer to the truth, but also deeper into danger. Finally, after days of relentless effort, he found what he was looking for: a name. Victor Lane, a senior advisor to President Laura Bennett. had been feeding classified details about the Invincible to the Zyrans. Ryan's heart raced as he reviewed the evidence. Victor wasn't just any official, he was one of the most trusted members of the President's inner circle. How could someone so close to power betray humanity? Ryan knew he had to act quickly, but exposing Victor wouldn't be easy. The man was careful, covering his tracks with layers of deception. One wrong move, and Ryan risked tipping him off. Determined, Ryan reached out to his handler, a woman named Lisa Meyer. "I've got him," Ryan said over a secure line. "Victor Lane is the mole. He's been sending the Zyrans everything they need to know about the Invincible." Lisa's voice was sharp with urgency. "Do you have proof?" "Enough to bring him down," Ryan replied. "But we need to move fast. If he finds out we're onto him, he'll disappear worse. Escalate the situation." Lisa agreed, and together they devised a plan. Ryan would gather irrefutable evidence, while Lisa coordinated with trusted allies in the government to ensure Victor couldn't escape justice. It was a risky operation, but there was no other choice. Meanwhile, Victor Lane sat in his office, oblivious to the storm brewing around him. He sipped his coffee and reviewed the latest reports on the Invincible. The ship was impressive, even by alien standards, and its existence terrified him. Humanity wasn't ready for a war with the Zyrans, and Victor believed that aligning with them was the only way to survive. He justified his betrayal as a necessary evil, though guilt gnawed at the edges of his conscience. That evening, Victor prepared to transmit another batch of data. He encrypted the files and sent them through a secure channel, confident that no one could trace it back to him. But as he worked, a faint sound caught his attention, the soft click of a door opening behind him. Before he could react, Ryan stepped into the room, flanked by 2 armed agents. "It's over, Victor," Ryan said, his voice cold and steady. "You're under arrest." Victor froze, his face pale with shock. For a moment, he said nothing. Then his expression hardened. "You don't understand," he spat. "This isn't betrayal, it's survival. The Zyrans will crush us if we fight them. I was trying to save lives." Ryan shook his head. "You endangered billions. Whatever your reasons, you crossed a line." As Victor was led away, Ryan felt a mix of relief and unease. They had stopped the leak, but the damage was already done. The Zyrans now knew the Invincible-esque vulnerabilities, and they wouldn't hesitate to exploit them. Back aboard the warship, Captain Jonathan Hayes received an urgent message from Earth. The enemy was preparing a counterattack using weapons designed specifically to target their ship. The crew braced themselves for what lay ahead. The betrayal had shaken their trust, but it also strengthened their resolve. If they were going to survive, they would have to rely on each other and the incredible machine they called home.